Our downtown studio is Detroit Police Chief James Craig. Now, first of all, this was not one of your police officers. This was a federal agent on a task force that does involve your police officers. Why do you feel it important to step out in front of this thing like you did yesterday?
Well, it's important because it's our community. This is our city, and certainly when there's something like this that's happening, it's involving law enforcement, people look to the police chief. You know, I take that responsibility very seriously. We have a great relationship with our community, and they wanted to hear from me. Certainly, they knew it was a federal agent involved, but they wanted to hear from the police chief, so it was critically important for me to get there as soon as I could and at least start the conversation and make some commitments, which we've done and which we're following through on. And so I'm optimistic. I know that there's a press conference planned in a few minutes, about 100 folks there, peaceful. I've talked to my staff, and again, we have a community meeting set up for tomorrow at 4 o'clock in the same neighborhood. So again, these things matter. Keeping the lines of communication open is just so critical.
You've talked to me about that before, Chief Craig, the importance of developing a relationship between the community and the police force, and you believe really that that is why, in your heart, you believe that we wouldn't see the kind of things we see in Baltimore if an incident like that happened in our area. Is that right?
I believe that, and now I'm not suggesting that things cannot happen. I think you go a long way when you're ahead of it, when you have a relationship with the community where the community truly trusts you. And so I saw it when I arrived at the scene yesterday. Certainly there were several in the group that were agitated, highly agitated. You know, I had a chance to talk with the family. Certainly they wanted to hear from me, and some in the community that were agitated, certainly their agitation diminished. And so it's important to have that relationship built up in advance of anything like this. And so it's important to me, and I'm looking forward to our meeting tomorrow so that we can keep the community up to date on what's going on with the investigation.
Now, Chief, to defuse that situation yesterday, we heard the sound just a moment ago. You promised to get to the bottom of this and to get accountability, to get the truth. What are you doing to get that?
We're doing an investigation. We're working it. We've been working it since yesterday. I've been updated on the case. I've had a conversation with Wayne County Prosecutor Kim Worthy. We've talked several times since this incident, and certainly when we're done with our work, we're going to hand it off to the prosecutor who will then evaluate and make a decision.
And what is your feeling right now, just looking at it on the surface? What do you feel? Do you feel like this was what they call a justified shooting?
Well, I don't want to prejudge it. I will tell you that what I know about the situation thus far is that the agent was faced with a threat, an imminent threat. As the suspect began to advance armed with a hammer, the agent was in a retreat mode, and he responded by using deadly force. So determination will be made as to whether or not that was proper. But again, he articulated, or there was an articulation, not him, but an articulation that he was faced with a threat.
We don't have a lot of time left, Chief Craig, but if we could just talk about Baltimore for a second. I don't know if it's right to ask you any advice for what they're doing in that city, or maybe what went wrong last night in your eyes as a police chief.
Well, I certainly don't want to be critical of Baltimore for a lot of reasons. One, the police commissioner, a friend of mine who we were raised up in the Southern California law enforcement family. I know him quite well. I know his sensitivity to the community. You know, when I look at a situation like that, one of the things that's most troubling for me, we cannot and will not allow people to violate the law. One thing that I know that certainly strikes close to me is the 1992 civil unrest in Los Angeles following the Rodney King verdict. What went wrong there was the allowing those who were engaged in criminal activity to continue. That can't happen. And so we certainly support our community to peacefully protest. I certainly take a dim view of those who try to incite people who want a peaceful protest. I certainly, and I said it to some of your colleagues prior to the press conference, that certainly the media has a great deal of responsibility in how they address these issues.
All right, Chief Craig, I'm sorry to interrupt you there. We understand. Thank you for your time. We do have to move on, though, and we're going to have more on what you've been talking about here and on that news conference going on here in town coming up at 5 o'clock.